Well, hello, Bible Love. So glad that y'all are with us today for our last installment in our Women in Ministry segment that we've done this summer. It has been so much fun, such a delight to talk to so many fantastic women, most all of who are very dear friends of mine. And today will be nothing less than wonderful. We're going to start off with the prayer attributed to St. Francis. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O God, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Well, listeners, today we are in for a treat. We have the Reverend Lathrop Mosley with us today. Lathrop and I both serve in the Diocese of Upper South Carolina. Lathrop is the assisting priest at St. James in Greenville, South Carolina. And over the last couple of months, we've gotten to know each other. And one of the things reasons I wanted to have Lathrop on is because she is very newly ordained. You got ordained in December of 2021. And so this is a new calling for you. And I am so glad you're here. Welcome.
I am so glad to be here too as well. It's been fun to get to know you, Mary Balfour.
Yeah, and we're good buds now. We've done Curcio together. We've done a lot of good things, and I'm happy to have. I'm always just so glad when I can have other women in my life that are clergy people and like get what I do and understand what I do and all of that. So, Lathrop, you and I have a lot in common. One of which is that we are both cradle Episcopalians, grew up in the Episcopal Church. So, kind of tell me about your church growing up and your church life, and really you had a long career before you were
Yes.
called into ordained ministry. So talk to me about that.
Yes, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, which just turned 100, and I was there for the 100th anniversary celebration in April, right after Easter. My parents started worshiping there before I was born, and so I started off like in the children's choir when I was in, grade level, and then got into EYC, acolyting, rang in the bell choir. Very involved in EYC and acolyting. So did mission trips, was on the leadership team, all of the things. And then went to Converse here in South Carolina in Spartanburg, and sort of continued worshiping at the Episcopal Church of the Advent. It was the closest Episcopal church to Converse, but I also went with other friends to other churches, which was a good experience.
Lathrop, let me stop you. Let me ask you something.
Sure.
So when you were involved in all of those things in high school, and like you were like me, you loved the church, those were your people. Were you feeling a call to ordain ministry at that time? Like when do you remember feeling like God was tapping you on the shoulder going, you might want to do this full time?
Well, actually, having listened to several or most all of these women in ministry podcasts, particularly the ones of the ordained people, very similar story. I felt called in 6th grade, which was mid 80s. So 10 years after women's ordination was approved in the Episcopal Church. And so similarly to some of the other women, I hadn't seen a woman. I didn't know it was a possibility. And my call was kind of vague. It wasn't vague, but it was not like you need to go be a priest. It was more like the church was home, and I knew it was it was going to be home, and it was going to be more than being a super involved layperson the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't define it because I hadn't seen a woman priest or even
Right.
a woman deacon. I was fortunate that St. Mark's called a woman my eighth grade year um, she was one of the assistants. She was in charge of Christian education. And so that's when I knew I was allowed to do it. Had no idea what all the steps were and what it would involve. And obviously, I will admit my age on your podcast, Mary Balfour. I will be 49 in the fall
Mm-hmm.
and newly ordained, newly graduated from seminary just last year. And so life has taken a lot of twists and turns, including meeting my husband and having to prioritize his education, his continuing education, his PhD, and just trying to find the right time and stuff that happened with the Episcopal Church in general
Mm-hmm.
kind of turned me off as
Mm-hmm.
well. So, um, long route, but let's see, what year is it? About 6 years ago, St. Christopher's in Spartanburg, which is my sponsoring parish and sending parish, um, called a gentleman, and I was on the search committee. In fact, I chaired it. And I knew when we called him that he was either going to outright challenge me and just ask me, or by his mere presence, he was going to ask me because I was already feeling restless. My second career, which you referred to, or my first career actually, was in higher education, um, college admissions for most of it. 12 years at Wofford, 5 years at Converse, and then I did a little development work at Converse as well.
So
So
during all that time, Lathrop, were you kind of pushing down this call, and you were just living in as like the most engaged layperson you could be?
living in as the most engaged layperson, um, especially with everything that happened with the Episcopal Church. I was like, yeah, I wouldn't touch this with a
Right.
million foot pole. And I would find something. So at St. Christopher's, I rang in the bell choir. I was a lector. I was a chalice bearer. I became a verger. I was senior warden, and I chaired a search committee, and everything I thought would fill that hole, and it never did. I
That's
figured verging would fill the hole. I was really close to the altar. I was helping kind of run things. I had a dear friend who called us ecclesiastical stage managers. So making
oh
sure
yeah.
everything went well, so that the priest did not have to worry if there was not an acolyte, not an usher, not a
Right.
whatever. Things were moving smoothly, so they could focus on the celebrating and the preaching aspect. So yeah, really involved layperson. The other thing that happened is I began to realize at Wofford, as much as I loved being there and loved the environment of being on a college campus, um, that I was not an admission counselor. So I wasn't traveling. I wasn't out there. I did get to speak to people. It's not like they kept me locked in my office because, of course, we all helped with events, and I would help when people from Jacksonville would come to make a good connection. But I realized the closest thing I came to using my gifts and talents were calming a parent, calming a student, calming a guidance counselor, calming a teacher if something was not there. It's going to be okay. We're going to work with you as long as you're doing your part, and if it was a student, staying on your guidance counselor to get their part in. We understand that your guidance counselor has 300 other students they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the closest I came to using my gifts and just being a positive presence in the office. Um, and I also realized, and people in higher ed might get this, might not, but I realized I was not meant to get the rocking chair or the lamp at the end at the retirement. Um, and I realized, no, I couldn't see myself retiring from Converse. There was only one thing I would like to do at Converse. Well, two now that I'm ordained, chaplain or director of alumni. And
Mm-hmm.
I really couldn't see myself, as much as I love Wofford, retiring from Wofford.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
it
So
was,
this new priest comes. You hire this new priest at St. Christopher's,
yes,
right?
right.
And is that what happened? That priest challenged you and pushed you and made
Pretty
you think.
much. I asked for a meeting pretty early on. Because I knew, which I was kind of like, okay, we need to talk about this. We just need to move with this. I had already had the conversation with Matt after all of that was happening, and my mom and several other people. And so I actually said, let's have lunch once you get officially on board and settled. I think Jim and his family were there like mid-June. So he had like a month or 2 months or 6 weeks before he even started
Mhm.
in Spartanburg to get to know the area and to have vacation, to have time with his family, to get um, his son settled and everything like that. So, but we had a conversation like within a week or two of when he officially started.
Mhm.
And so the ball began rolling from there. The calendar in the Diocese of Upper South Carolina was changed, so that pushed things back a little bit. But that was okay. You know, Jim had to get to know me. Uh, St. Christopher's, I don't think, was very surprised when it came out, although it was kept pretty top secret because you never want to tell somebody early on and then things not work out. So,
Right.
yep, it was pretty early on in his ministry at St. Christopher's. So
That you went through the discernment committee
that
and
I started the conversation with him, that we started conversations, and then went on to the diocesan discernment the next year, I think in
yeah.
2016. Yeah,
And in the midst of that, you had a tragedy in your life. Your
I did.
husband died, and that was awful and terrible, and still something that you deal with. But you
Hmm.
also had to make the decision. Do I carry on with this? What would Matt wanted me to do, and what did you decide?
I was given the advice actually by the chair of the Commission on Ministry at the time, the day of the funeral, as a matter of fact, to go on and proceed with discernment. I had called to kind of pause it, if you will. Actually, I think either Jim or Ned Morris, who was the rector at Advent where I interned, made that official call.
Mhm.
Um, but to go on with discernment on a delayed schedule and to at least be granted postulancy and then decide if I wanted to go in the fall of 2018 or I wanted to take a year off, continue working, do whatever. And so I decided, our bishop then, Bishop Andrew Waldo, and the Commission on Ministry gave me lots of grace and space that I needed, and I completed it a little delayed, but still was allow myself the opportunity to go in the August of 2018. And I
You-
decided to go on and do that.
Where'd you go?
Um, I went to Sewanee, the University of the South, to the School of Theology. And I knew based on conversations with another wonderful clergy in our diocese, Mia McDowell, who also had a tragedy, but hers happened mid seminary, that Sewanee, and I knew Sewanee from my family, would be a good place to continue to heal and grieve. But I would have a supportive community up there and still have my community back here in Upper South Carolina.
Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about that in a lot of ways because we talked about this first career and go into seminary in your 40s and then it not looking the way you had planned,
Nope.
with your husband not tragically dying and not being there, and how do you go do that and be a single person? But God gave you the grace and the will and the power and the strength to go and do this, and as you said, it became a very healing experience for you in a lot of ways. So I think sometimes, I mean, it depends on the person, but I think sometimes in our grief and our tragedy, like we do need to keep going forward. We do need to, and trust that God and the people around us will support us, right? And that's what happened for you.
Absolutely. My classmates, there were 14 of us. Well, I think we started with 16 or 17 Master of Divinity students, but they were amazingly supportive. I actually had a classmate who had lost his spouse like a year and a half or 2 years before mine. So we kind of buddied up, and we still, talk to all of our class. We all talk to each other, as you know. There, we stay close with one another. Um, but this community was hugely supportive. And that my community here, and I will tell you, and not a lot of people know this, but so Matt worked for the Spartanburg Day School and started teaching at one point, and then just kind of rose is not the word I'm looking for, but was promoted and was administration. Actually, really would have been assistant head, although he didn't have the title when he died. And the head of school shared with my mom and I, and we're talking like a week after the funeral, probably, we went to go to the day school and see her and take some stuff of Matt's back to the school and everything. She said, one of the things when Matt interviewed for the promotion, he said, is that I want to do this so Lathrop has her time to go and do what she needs to do, and she feels supported. We were going to be apart for 3 years because it made sense for him to stay at the Spartanburg Day School, and he had gotten this ninth promotion. He was going to get another salary bump, and so it just made more sense because finding a job, if any of you know Sewanee, you know that there's not a lot up there, and so finding a job that would be competitive up there for him would have been a challenge. And so Rachel Deems, the head of school, shared that with me, and she said, Matt would want you to continue this.
I love that. And
And
that's
she
another
reminded me, and
information.
she was actually at my diaconal ordination, and she reminded me every step of the way when I would go back and visit that this is what Matt would want you to do. Don't
Yeah.
question it. This is what Matt would want. And there are a lot of people there. She's not the only one who was saying that along the way.
But
Um,
you got that affirmation throughout.
yes, I
Now,
did get a lot of questions. People, I don't know, guessed that I decided after Matt's death to do this, and I had to explain. No, I actually just started discernment really
a
in
long time.
2015.
Yeah.
Well, a long ongoing call, obviously, but really it formally in 2015 at St. Christopher's, and then through the diocese in 2016. I was like, this is not something I just up and decided to randomly do after Matt died. This was an ongoing process. So
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that point too. Now, when you're in seminary, your middler year, you're in this fantastic community, you're being supported, and this a terrible thing called a pandemic happened,
yep,
and you had to y'all had to change and
we
learn in
did.
a different way and learn online. You all stayed in Swanee, but it was very different, right?
It was very different. So I tell people I can't imagine a better place to ride out a pandemic than Sewanee. If anyone is familiar, it is beautiful, lots of hiking, lots of walking. And so, what kept me and a lot of seminarians sane was the ability, of course, with that the second part of that spring semester of 2020, everybody was virtual. And
Mhm.
as we were doing classes from our apartments, our houses, whatever at Sewanee. As seminarians, a lot of us sold houses, gave up leases to move, so they couldn't tell us to go home because
Right.
Sewanee was home. So we just stayed in our places and did class via Zoom. We all learned Zoom together. But my thing was, as soon as class was out, I was going out to walk. Um, and I had classmates who did it with me, and that's the way we would actually be able to be together. Um, and the summer was very quiet. But then my senior year, we did a combination, a hybrid of online and in person. And we had the option, we didn't have to choose, okay, I'm going to be completely online or completely in person, but we could make the decision from day to day, class to
What
class,
works best for you?
what
Yeah.
was best for us. Of course, if we were sick, they didn't want us there. But the interesting thing was, unless we were in class in chapel, which was very limited, as with every church
Mhm.
in the United States, in the world, very limited attendance, or in a meeting, which a lot of them were on Zoom, we couldn't be in the seminary. So all of our social interactions were significantly cut, which was really hard. We did a lot of sitting on porches and small group gatherings. For example, the class that came in my senior year, we hardly know them. There's a seminarian from Upper South Carolina who's a rising senior now, Tyler. The only way I got to know Tyler was through a few social things because we weren't in hanging out in the
Right.
student commons or being able to hang out in the classroom. Sewanee is interesting in that you are in one class for all of your core classes, and the professors come to you. So there's a junior classroom, there's a middler classroom, there's a senior classroom, and then your electives you may rotate. We couldn't even do that, and a lot of people would study in their class in the classroom and treat that as a work day. So it was definitely different. And
Mm.
I could certainly empathize and sympathize with every high school senior last year or
Right.
the year before, and not getting the graduation I wanted. We graduated on the football field instead of in All Saints Chapel, so that was different. But we did have like friends or family members. Um, Very different to experience seminary in a pandemic, because a lot of the normal seminary things like doing field ad, which is kind of like sort of, I would equate it to teachers practicums that teachers do. Um, I had 6 weeks in person, and then the pandemic happened, and I couldn't go in person because Sewanee wanted to keep us on the mountain
Mm-hmm.
and keep a bubble around us to really give the undergraduates the best experience they could have.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, you made it through,
I
and
did,
then you were called back to the diocese.
fortunately. This is
Fortunately,
home now.
St. James, Greenville. And so you were ordained a deacon in June of 2021 and a
Yes.
priest in December of 2021. So you haven't even hit, or I guess you're just hitting 1 year as an ordained person. So tell me what that has been like. What is life as an ordained person? And do you feel like you are finally doing what God put on your heart as a sixth grader?
I do feel
That's
like
what
I'm
you told
doing what God put on my heart as a sixth grader. It has been interesting. So I am, my title is curate, which means priest in training. And uh, the rector here has gone to serve the diocese.
me. Right.
So the idea of being a curate is that you are mentored by the rector of the church. And so I'm in a bit of a holding pattern as we wait for our interim to arrive. And I have been, I think the most interesting thing, aside from just getting to know the people here who are absolutely lovely and wonderful and have been hugely supportive of me. St. James reminds me a lot of St. Christopher's because it is smaller and you do get to know everybody. It's not like a big downtown church
Right.
where it's hard to get to know everybody. So the worship here
Well,
is
as hard as
wonderful.
this is, Lathrop, like there is a lot of, I mean, being by yourself right now and kind of being solo,
Yes.
there is a lot of goodness in that. Like you're getting to really dig in and enjoy and
Yes.
get to know people. And so I know that's not like exactly what you signed up for, but I do think you're getting a fantastic experience early on. And, I was by myself for 2 years and it was some of the best 2 years because they just taught me. I was talking to another person. They taught me how to be a priest, and I'll
Hmm.
never forget that. And I hope you're having that same
I
experience.
am. They have been hugely supportive. The vestry here has been hugely supportive. And I have done, possibly more than I would do
Right.
had Stephen still been here. So I did the baptisms at Pentecost and I did the whole baptismal liturgy, which was a first for me. Um, I have done a funeral now. That was last week. May have another one before the interim arrives. And I am doing a wedding this weekend. So that's a first as well.
Yeah. So all
So
those sacramental things, how does that feel? That's something that you've been wanting to do a lot of your life. How does it feel to get to do those things now?
it is amazing. I have to pinch myself. And as I told at Christmas, my mom was here after my ordination. She just stayed from my ordination through to Christmas. And I was sitting, we brought in food between our 8 and our 11 o'clock service on Christmas Eve. And I was sitting there, I was like, I have to like compartmentalize because I had celebrated that 9 o'clock service, whatever time it was. It's like I have to cover. If I think too much about what I'm doing, I am going to cry
Yeah.
because I am finally here. Even though I had had a few weeks of celebrating to celebrate on Christmas Eve, I celebrated on Easter. I sometimes have to say, okay, don't think about this too much, or you're
Yeah.
going to get really emotional up there. And I know, having talked to priests who have been in it for a while, I'm sure you could say that, Mary Balfour. There's some moments where it still sneaks up on you, and you
Yeah. And
still
I
go,
mean,
"Holy crap, I'm doing this."
yeah, and you know what? I feel like because we're in the women in ministry, like I feel like that's one of the beauties of women is that sometimes our emotions are a little bit more present. I mean, as much as you've been through with losing your husband, like you can be with people when their
Mhm.
spouses are dying and you know what that feels like. I've talked about this with somebody else, like women that are walking through breast cancer, like we get it, we have breasts, like all those
Yeah,
things
exactly.
that, I'm so grateful that there are women in this. And I have cried celebrating the Eucharist. I have cried at a funeral. I've cried at a baptism. And I'm not sorry for that. I'm
Right.
glad that my tears have come, and I'm glad your tears are coming, because it is such an honor. I cannot say this enough, to do what we do. And
It is.
I'm about 7 years ahead of you. I've been ordained 8 years, and I still feel honored. I remember talking to my dad one time, and I said, he said, the day you need to stop doing it is the day you quit feeling honored by it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and he's been ordained 30 years,
Wow.
and I just think I'm not saying every day is easy, but that getting to serve God and God's people in this way has been just the biggest honor of my life. And I know you feel that too. And I'm so glad you're finally getting to do it, even at
Yeah,
47, right? Like that and I think that's another great example, Lathrop, is like God can call us at any time, you know?
exactly.
So thank you for being a part of that and saying yes to God's call, for being a strong woman in this ministry and showing other people that God can do things for us, even in tragedy, at any age, all those things. I'm so grateful. I'm so glad you're a priest in this diocese. I'm so glad you're my friend.
I know.
Listeners, I'm so grateful you have been with us these 8 weeks as we have lifted up these powerful women in ministry. We've had lay people, we've had ordained people, we've had all kind of people, and it has been my honor and privilege to share their voices with you. So thank you for that. And listeners, as always, we love you, but most importantly, God does.